Hello, my name is Brian DiPaolo, and I lead Accudata Systems Strategic Services Practice. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to our webinar, Privileged Account Security. Today's presentation will examine best practice strategies to protect your privileged accounts. CyberArk is a leading technology targeting cyber threats that make their way inside, undetected, to attack the heart of the enterprise. Over 3,000 global businesses trust CyberArk to protect their highest value assets, enabling them to secure privileged access, which is the target of nearly every recent major breach. We're excited to partner with CyberArk to bring you today's look at privileged account security. At this time, I would like to introduce today's speaker, David Adamczyk, North American Vice President with CyberArk. David has dedicated more than 10 years focused on privileged account security deployments during his tenure at CyberArk. We're excited to have David join us today. Without further delay, please welcome David Adamczyk.
Thank you, Brian. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak today in our partnership. If we were speaking 5-7 years ago, oftentimes we would be very focused on audit. Privileged accounts on PCI, SOX, HIPAA, compliance devices, being able to show accountability, who has access to the privileged accounts, who used the privileged accounts at a point in time. And the compliance devices are a subset of our environment. Once the breaches started happening, now we were no longer focused on just the compliance devices, but bad guys would go after any device to get into the environment. So privileged account security now became an exponentially larger challenge because we were no longer looking at a subset of our environment, but all of the devices. And we're not just talking about servers, local admin root, but also service accounts, databases, network devices, workstations, lights out management, point of sale, software as a service, cloud, and the number grows and grows. Even organizations that had just been through a breach still do not have unlimited time and resources to boil the ocean. What we wanted to be able to do is be more strategic, being able to start off by reducing the most risk for the least effort. And to do so, it's helpful to look at these breaches, whether we're talking about an Anthem, a Home Depot, a Target, a Sony, etc., to be able to see the repetitive themes and be able to work backwards. So in all of these breaches, the initial entry point was a low-value asset, whether it be a laptop that's stolen, a phishing attack, a stale vendor account which is compromised. And that initial entry point would not create any great organizational risk to the enterprise. The challenge is lateral movement. If, for example, we have the same local admin password in all of our laptops, once one laptop is compromised, they are all compromised. And the bad guy can start moving laptop to laptop. And what they may be looking for is a laptop where someone on the IT staff logged in to troubleshoot an issue or install an application. When that member of the IT staff logs out, they leave a hash value behind, their signature. This hash value sits on that device until they change their password, which may be 30 days from now. The bad guy can grab this hash, they do not even have to decrypt it, and now they can start moving server to server to server. And what they're looking for is a server where somebody logged in as domain admin. When that person logged out, they left a domain admin hash. The bad guy can now log in as domain admin to the domain controller, run a golden ticket attack. Now, there isn't any sensitive data on the domain controller, but the domain controller is the means to the end. Once the domain controller is compromised, the bad guy can then be anywhere, anytime, and we cannot get them out. So, if we want to be able to take a step back and say, if we could put a unique privilege account on every device and change our domain admin passwords after each use, there would not be a challenge with lateral movement or pass the hash. But if that can't be done, what we want to be able to do is how do we reduce this risk? So when we want to reduce the risk, generally we're going to look at a 60-day sprint. So what are the things that we can do in a 60-day time period to show measurable risk reduction? Of course, the audit reports are tied in to be able to meet compliance. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. But in addition to being able to just meet audit, oftentimes this is now a board-level discussion. So being able to show measurable risk reduction at the end of the sprint is also something that CyberArk and the Accudata team is very comfortable with helping with. When we're looking at the three aspects of sprint, the first is going to be local admin and root. Local admin and root are high-risk accounts, but they're seldomly used. They don't have dependencies. Therefore, they are a very good starting point. And there are many ways to manage local admin. There are password vault tools. You could write a PowerShell script to do it on your own. But when we think about local admin, we think about local admin as the foundation on which we want to build. So we want to make sure that once local admin is done, we start looking at service accounts and SA accounts, we can build a repeatable process. So we're not having one solution for local admin, one solution for Cisco. We want to have one solution to manage all of our privileged accounts. But starting off with local admin is a great starting point because of the risk reduction, as well as the fact that it's an account that's seldomly, if ever, used. The first thing we can do is discover these local admin accounts, put a unique local admin account on each one of the servers and workstations. But every time we take a step forward on the security side, we also want to make sure that we have an operational efficiency benefit as well. And the reason why many organizations did not do this in the past was simply whose job would it be to keep track of it to make sure they're correct and available. With CyberArk, we have a verification feature. If we can ensure the passwords on the laptops and the servers are in sync with the passwords in CyberArk, now having a unique password is no more operationally complex than previously it was to have the same password for all. The auditing side benefit is now we can tie who has access to the local admin accounts, who used local admin on Windows Server 12 at 2 o'clock on Tuesday. The second thing that we commonly look at is our commercially off-the-shelf applications. If we have a vulnerability scanner, a Qualys, a Nessus, a Rapid7, in order for a vulnerability scanner to do its job, it must log into devices with a high-power credential to run the scan. When it logs out, it can leave hashes behind. You could certainly manually change that password after each use, but we have a lot on our plates. These things get missed. Automation is critical. We have an out-of-the-box integration. So, for example, before the Qualys scan would run, it would pull the password from CyberArk. After the scan is done, we can rotate the password. So a very nice risk reduction for no effort. Beyond vulnerability scanners, if we're looking at service desk, the service desk now CMDB, being able to pull that credential. We have what's called the C3 Alliance. Essentially, our customers said best-of-breed security solutions need to work together so we don't have any point solutions. Often vulnerability scanners are the quick win, but there are other off-the-shelf applications that are great use cases as well. And the third, if we talked about the bad guy getting in with that low-value entry point and then spending on average 200 and some odd days per Mandiant, harvesting the credentials, moving laterally past the hash to ultimately get to the domain controller. Well, if we can't boil the ocean, i.e. have all these accounts be unique and managed right out of the gate, let's isolate those high-value assets. And we're going to classify a high-value asset as any asset that, if compromised, would create great organizational risk. Domain controllers are always at the top of this list, being that they are the means to the end. But in addition to domain controllers, we can be talking about critical databases, compliance servers. Any asset that, if compromised, would create great organizational risk would be a high-value asset. So far, we've talked about the proactive steps that we can leverage to reduce our risk, starting off with the sprint, the low-hanging fruit first, and then we're going to talk about what we do in the long term. But what I would like to also do is I would like to tie this back to analytics. A common challenge that our customers had as they were moving forward, they deployed a SIM. And if we deploy a SIM, oftentimes we get a lot of alerts. And the moment we get too many alerts, all of the alerts become meaningless. We've certainly been on site post-breach and seen where an alert has come through, but even if we don't get to that alert for an hour, that is plenty of time for the bad guy to cover their tracks and move on. How can we assist? We are in no way, shape, or form a replacement for a SIM, but we do want to complement. With CyberArk, we can look for anomalous activity in 3 data sources. Number 1, the vault. People are creatures of habit. Having 2-factor authentication for IT members to access critical accounts stored within the password vault is definitely the best practice. However, if we do not have 2-factor authentication, we can accept the fact that people, good guys, will act differently than bad guys. If I generally need the SA account once or twice a month, and that's my user workflow within CyberArk, well, if the bad guy gets in, they're going to act very differently than me. They're probably going to retrieve as many accounts as they can. So we can build up a user profile for the members of the IT staff accessing privileged accounts and be able to provide notifications for anomalous activity. Number 2, we have a network tab or an agent to be able to just watch the traffic on the domain controller. So if there is a golden ticket attack, which is what occurs just before your domain controller is compromised, we can notify you. And number 3, we have an integration with the SIM. Of course, we can send syslog alerts to the SIM just as any other solution in your organization. But with CyberArk, we also have a bidirectional integration with the majority of the major SIMs in the marketplace. You could certainly write the rules within Splunk as to what is an anomalous activity. But our customers were having a challenge doing that. They said, CyberArk, can you help us? Can you write the rules for us? We want something out of the box. So that's what we did. We built the algorithms to look for excessive access, abnormal IPs. Let's say, for example, there's a database that's accessed by an application every day at 7 a.m. and 4 p.m. from a specific IP address where the application server. Let's say that application ID logs in at 3 a.m. from a different IP address. It is a perfectly valid ID, but it's never been used at 3 a.m. before, and it's never come in from this IP address. It's programmatic. This should never be able to happen. So we can score this high and put it back on the SIM. The SIM team is not going to have to code to CyberArk. They're just going to get the alert scored for them instead of them writing the rules. So, and again, it would be great if we had time to follow up on all anomalous activity, our entire environment. But if we don't, oftentimes let's just focus on those key assets, those critical databases, where if something anomalous is happening, it is worth our time to look into it. Today, thus far, we've talked about what do we want to do first. We want to start off with a low-hanging fruit. We want to be able to, in our 60-day sprint, we want to get those easy wins, local admin, root. We want to make sure that our vulnerability scanners are not creating additional headaches. We want to isolate our domain controllers without changing the workflows and reducing operational efficiency. But once that's done, we want to be able to look at the things that aren't as easy, but that still need to be addressed. Service accounts is a big area here. Service accounts, the common challenge is we don't know where they are. There's risk. What if we miss one? What if an account gets locked out? Like everything else, auto discovery is critical. Being able to see before we change results in the best outcome. We have auto discovery. So we could say, you have this domain account and you have these 5 service accounts tied to it, and this is where they are, most importantly. Now, unlike local admin, where we'll move very quickly in large chunks, when we get to service accounts, this is where we will slow down. With service accounts, we might say, let's pick 1 or 2 this weekend. We click the change button. CyberArk changes the domain account. CyberArk updates the service account. CyberArk restarts that service account. If it works, great, we move on. If there's an issue, somebody put that password somewhere else, something breaks, we go back. I'm not going to sugarcoat service accounts and hard-coded application passwords, but like any other complex problem, if we break it down into small pieces, we can be successful. We want to rinse and repeat as we move through our service accounts, our databases, our network devices, lights out management, cloud. Again, cloud would be a whole presentation in and of itself, but when we do look at cloud, we want to make sure that with cloud, we're doing the basic things first, AWS, the AWS Admin Web Console, the security token service, the AWS key. The AWS key is what does the dynamic provisioning in the cloud, being able to isolate these accounts. And then if you're using orchestration tools to do dynamic provisioning of instances in the cloud, we just become a part of that process. Leveraging our REST API, when an instance is spun up with the cloud, we can also manage it. Same thing comes if we're moving to the cloud and we're rewriting our applications. Legacy applications have hard-coded passwords within them. We know this isn't a good best practice at this point, but especially when moving into the cloud, we want to be able to address this. We're probably not going to go re-architect all of our legacy applications, but we can assist you to make sure that new hard-coded applications do not have passwords in the code. And when we're looking at the DevOps lifecycle, making sure that we're not going to have to go and update a password on a production instance. Obviously, this would break the DevOps lifecycle. So again, a conversation which we can discuss further with the Accudata team as a follow-up. But if cloud is an area that you're moving, being able to stop at this point before we run full steam into the cloud and be able to look and be able to set this up in a way that's going to make things easier going forward is definitely beneficial, and we do have a lot of experience here. In summary, before passing it back to Brian, what do we want to do as part of that 60-day sprint? Let's start off with the low-hanging fruit. Let's pull in our local admin accounts. Let's verify that they're correct. Let's have our vulnerability scanner pulling the pass from CyberArk to close that hole. And let's isolate our high-value assets so if we are breached, the core remains secure. Then let's get into semi-automated password change with our local admin just so that we can see that it works. Once we see that it works, then we can schedule local admin root, just change every 60 days. We rinse and we repeat as we move through the organization to be able to get to the ideal of unique privilege accounts across the board. Over the long term, but starting off reducing the most risk for least effort. We've talked about the program, but organizations will often say, we're not going to start the privileged account program for 6 months. Is there anything that we can do in the short term? We do offer a no-charge tool called DNA, which CyberArk and the AccuData team can assist in providing you. It is a no-charge tool. It is an executable. You run it, you keep the data. We have no access to it. It can be able to quantify how many, what's in the local administrator group, how many service accounts do you have. It'll also be able to draw a pass the hash map for you. So if somebody logged into a laptop with a domain admin account and you have a domain admin hash on a laptop, you can say to a specific person, please change your domain admin password and don't log into laptops. So there's always some low-hanging fruit that we can go after, even from a manual perspective before we start a program. We do also offer jointly penetration and red team exercises to make sure we find the holes that need to be filled first and focus on those rather than just shooting from the hip. At this point, I'll pass it back to Brian. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, David, and thank you all for joining our webinar today. As you continue to improve your security posture, keep AccuData in mind. We are an industry leader in security, and our tenured experts are ready to discuss your security strategy. Feel free to email me directly with any of your questions, or if you'd like a meeting to discuss a specific topic with one of our experienced consultants. Additionally, we can schedule a CyberArk DNA scan to inventory your privileged accounts, as well as explore penetration testing to understand your current risks. We appreciate you joining, and thanks again for your time. Have a great day.